Call it what you want. Seems that one of us is crazy, and everything we got to believe don't mean a thing.
So, hi. Thanks for
Hi,
coming on to Musicianship, Joel Eckels.
thanks for having me. It's
It is
exciting.
very exciting to have you, and we're really excited about discovering more about you. We are already pretty intertwined in the music community with what you've been doing.
Thank you.
That's really you're
Yeah,
welcome.
I think,
Uh,
I think when we talked before, me doing everything that I do and spinning all the plates is kind of like this like, you know, two parallel roads that are eventually I'm hoping to come together and not be just a collision,
yeah,
but hopefully kind of merge rather than collide. And so,
I
yeah,
agree. So
it's
how
kind of,
did
yeah, it's
Yeah.
ambitious.
So when you were, it sounds like you were a Navy brat, as they say. I guess they like to. But what are your influences? What were you one of those young musicians, or did it come upon you later? How did you? What is your personal journey
Yeah,
as an artist in music and songwriting?
yeah, it's funny. I mean, yeah, we were in a Navy family. My dad was in the Navy as a civil engineer, and we moved every 2 or 3 years, and mostly just bouncing back and forth between East Coast, West Coast, and then bef there was at one point where we got stationed in Iceland, and so I was there for a couple years, and right before that was actually where I really got into music, and I was later than a lot of people. My household, we had music all the time, but it wasn't like what most kids grow up with. Like my parents, God bless my parents, they're such huge music fans now, and they always were to some level, but we had to later on really educate them about all the music they missed. And so we kind of found our way on our own, my brother and I. I'm speaking of my brother Sean, he's 4 years younger than me. And so what happened was we got my dad was always encouraging me to play guitar because he just thought it was the coolest thing, and he thought it was an instrument that's great to bring to parties and you can entertain people, and it's like this great. So he apparently always loved whenever somebody had a guitar, so he was encouraging me thinking that this would be a great thing. And I honestly didn't have interest in playing guitar at the time, and but I did start to find that I wanted to play an instrument, and I'm not even sure what inspired that. And I know that most schools started everybody with instruments around the fifth grade, and you kind of got introduced to it. Then sixth grade a little deeper, and then seventh grade was when you started really getting into it. And I didn't really tune in fifth or sixth grade much at all. And then late in the game, I'm like, I want to play something. So it started out with drums, and then I just couldn't keep, I couldn't do a drum roll, and that was aggravating me. So I just got tired of that. And for some reason, I decided I wanted to play saxophone, and I got into saxophone. I got this crash course from some old jazz blues guy that was like in the basement of a music store in Silverdale, Washington. And I can look back and appreciate who that guy was, but at the time I was just like, whatever, I'm just going to get these lessons, and this guy's giving me 2 years of whatever introduction to saxophone that I missed, and getting it all in a summer so that I could be up to par with everybody when I got to seventh grade. And so that's what happened. And I was fortunate in that he really schooled me pretty well, and I ended up excelling and becoming, more advanced than a lot of the other people in the bands and stuff that I was in class with. And it just kind of went from there. And I got introduced to reading music and just all kinds of different things with actually like playing music. But it wasn't until I moved to Iceland, and I mean, I guess before that, there was like Guns N' Roses was happening and all that. So I got really into rock and roll. And so I had the interest to play guitar finally by then, but I didn't really get into playing guitar until I moved to Iceland. And there was a guy there that I befriended who's kind of the outcast in the town, on the bass, that he knew all the good music and he knew how to play guitar. And he introduced me to so much. So that was kind of the precursor to everything. And then being in Iceland, there wasn't a lot to do, so I was literally 8 hours a day practicing guitar at times. So
Whoa. So
yeah,
your introduction to like harder rock and roll was in Iceland?
Before all that, when I was living in Washington State, Bremerton, Washington. It's just across the Puget Sound from Seattle, and it. I was getting into a lot of different music on my own. I actually got we were everybody I was around was mostly listening to the pop of that time and early rap, which I really got into. I was a big Run DMC fan and all that kind of stuff. And but then the hair metal thing was happening and all the power ballads and all that, and I was getting into that stuff. But then when Guns N' Roses happened, that kind of woke me up to a whole new thing. And so that was, I mean, for me, that was my introduction to like really seeing a whole different dimension to all of that music. I always was a fan, and I knew a lot of music and listened to the radio constantly, but really being educated on all the classic rock and the classic soul and all, I mean, it was just like fragments for a while until that time when it kind of really just took over, and all my focus suddenly became music.
So that's some kind of an advantage, it sounds like. When you live in different regions, you get exposed to a lot of different approaches to music. I'm sure trained, like you said, trained and just people who have learned by ear. And so how did that affect I'm sure it affected your sound, like you just said. You lived in Georgia, Florida, Iceland, as you mentioned before. How do you think that compares? What is one of the coolest music scenes out of those that you've kind of encountered or felt most at home in?
I don't know. I mean, I can definitely say the advantage to moving around was definitely being exposed to just lots of different things, because every place has the things at that time that everybody's into, and the more you can get around and be worldly, there's just so much more. And it's just getting out of the bubble, I think, really.
Totally.
And so I mean, I guess the advantage for me was that I was influenced by a lot of different things coming from a lot of different angles, and looking back now, I'm glad I had that, and it's really interesting. But as far as, I mean, and there's every place had its own thing that stood out, their lessons or just things that I picked up along the way. And then, as far as like music scenes that really inspired me, I mean, I didn't get into like music scenes like with other musicians and stuff until I was just a senior in high school, basically.
Right.
I mean, I was more just woodshedding all the way up to then. And then my senior year in high school, I moved to Virginia Beach, Virginia, where I graduated there. And I was like new kid, senior year in high school, which sucked. And but I had some friends, and we put a band together, and I played my first gig at a real music venue during that time. And and that was interesting, because like the first show we ever played, it was me and my buddy Brian Carter. We played this weird eclectic set, but it was our first time playing in front of people. It was like some kind of open mic sort of thing. And I remember we played, and it was like this exhilarating experience. And then we literally got off stage, and there was these two beautiful girls waiting to talk to us when we got off stage. So I was sold right then. It was like the everything they said is true. It's like that kind of thing.
Like
So
the girls, baby.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they ended up bringing us to our first Grateful Dead concert. So it was just like it's like just
Oh,
kept kind of going and rolling into one thing into another. And so I mean, I literally look at the music journey that I've been
yeah.
on as just riding a wave, or different waves in a lot of ways, because you don't know where it's going to take. You don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know what what's going to lead into the next, and you just gotta take it as it comes. And I've basically done that, and have, it's not always been easy, and that's for sure. But I mean, now I can look back and see and appreciate so many different things that have come about from all these different waves I've taken, or different choices, and leaps of faith, or whatever you want to call it.
Would you say that that you got into engineering and sound mixing like by necessity, or was it something that you wanted
Accident.
to like? Yeah. Okay. So tell us about
Purely,
that, and then how you kind of implemented that into your into your repertoire, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of really just catching these waves. I literally, without going into, full detail of it, I mean, when I first moved to LA in 2000, um, my, before that I was in Atlanta, and I moved to Atlanta in 96, and I was with a touring band. We were touring for a living for several years, and we ended up in Atlanta because all of our, most of the year our touring was around the Southeast, and Atlanta made the most sense. At the time, we were up in New England, which is a whole nother story we can get into. But we ended up in Atlanta, and for the first time, we decided we didn't want to tour as crazy as we were touring, and so we wanted to be able to dig a little deeper into the kinds of shows we were doing, and not just hustling, for money, and so we decided to kind of take day jobs so that we could make money in another way, so that we could focus on the music we wanted to make rather than taking any gig just to get paid. So that was a different shift for me, and I fell back on my skills that I had learned growing up through my dad of getting into construction, and I started on a framing crew and worked my way into some finish carpentry. And when I moved to LA, I had a whole finish carpentry career for like 10 years or something. Well, maybe not quite 10, but it was long and pretty intense. And I got my way up to being a finish carpenter, doing big multi-million dollar mansions all around town. And what happened was, when the housing market collapsed in 2008, I had to get out because I was losing a lot of money. There was everything got shady, and people were screwing each other out of contracts and everything. So I got out of it. And at the time, it happened to come right at the time when I just started doing sound at Room 5, and Jay Nash, who was running Room 5 before that, we were playing there regularly, like doing we would do residencies and book the whole night, and have all these cool events. And Jay was always the guy booking the room, and he would get me these gigs filling in on sound. And part of the reason I got into sound was because I was one of the guys that could do the songwriters in the round on Mondays. And the requirement to run those nights in place of Jay was that you had to be able to run sound and play, because there was no money to go around to pay two people. You had to be one. and so I fit the bill, and it just, when the housing market collapsed and I had to get out of construction, I decided to take on Room 5 with that offer that he gave me, and I took it and ran with it, really, and I kind of worked towards getting a little bit control of the whole calendar, so that we could really keep a quality and consistency going on. And I spent many years just shaping that, and so it was because of that. When I was running sound at Room 5, I got into the booking by accident, because I was running sound and there'd be stuff that wasn't all that great being booked, and I realized, if I'm the booker, then I can actually have a say in who I'm running sound for. And that's how I got into booking. And then I just got so in tune with that room and how to make it sound great. And I mean, some nights would just sound like a record. I mean, it was cool. There was a warm energy of that particular room, and it wasn't a great setup, but I learned how to work around it and really manipulate that. And then, eventually I got into working over at Hotel Cafe and got into a little bit bigger system. And then over years of just kind of throwing myself to the wolves and trying different things, I got really good at it, and got a reputation for doing great sound. And then that turned into opportunities to go out on the road. And then now I've kind of taken the audio thing to a whole different level, and I've been able to work in every capacity or every size production you can throw at me at this point. But yeah, it's literally been by accident that I fell into all this, and it was just me trying to be in the music world, stay in the music world, and be a part of the community. And then I always have been very much into the live music experience, and like quality live music experience, because the nuances are what makes all the difference in the shows. and you're working at a place like Hotel Cafe, especially, and Room 5, and some of the artists that we would have were just amazing. And if they felt comfortable enough, and those rooms became the most comfortable to a lot of these artists, that you get these performances that were incredible, and everything that you want. And then I found that I could accentuate that even more with the sound, and I just got really into it, and I have a love for it, and I've always appreciated great sound engineers,
Yeah.
and know that they're not I know that they're hard to come by, the ones that really care. I know that they make the difference in the whole live music experience,
Mhm.
and just the care that's given from, versus somebody that's just, you know, not even, they just want to go home. I mean, there's the nuances, and I realized early on that that was so important, and it kind of tied me to doing that and that purpose. And I would train people, but I always, there was just something that you couldn't train, that I just felt a purpose in being there and doing all that. And it just carried, really. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird.
I do that too. I hop on a light board if I find I have a tech or an engineer that does not, or a designer that doesn't care, or I think that it's just about caring enough to do it correctly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that really care, and you're one of them. And I appreciate all the stuff that I know I've heard that you've been in the room mixing with all the live shows, and the benefit to our community, because that can make or break an artist's start. Even, I mean, even if
Yeah.
it's their first time on stage, even if it's their 1,000th time on stage, it'll throw you if your sound sucks. I mean, can't hear yourself in the monitors,
Oh yeah.
cracking the speakers, all of that stuff. I mean, people know it's important, but they don't know how vital it is to their experience and the cohesiveness of working with the performer on stage, and that trust that
Yeah.
has to be there. So
Yeah, I mean, I even find, because I train a lot of engineers
yeah,
nowadays, and but there's also, even with that, like, there's parts of it you can't teach, and you try to at least point in the right direction, but they got to pick up the ball and understand it on their own. There's certain things, especially in music, there's certain things in life that I find you just can't explain, and
yeah,
those are usually the things that the people that get it without having to be explained, that they're the special element that adds to things, and that nuance.
well, I think it's like the quality that I find that's so lovely that you possess is you care. You have passion behind
It's
what you
really where it
are doing.
starts. Yeah, it's all about
Yeah.
caring.
So how did you get started with Haley Reinhardt, right? That's kind
Hmm.
of when you went, was that your first like
She
official?
was, yeah, she was my
Yeah.
first official tour,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I love
Cool.
Haley. She's awesome. I mean, she's the real
Sounds like
deal.
I was thinking when you said it sounded like a record some nights, I was thinking of her voice,
Oh yeah.
because I was
Yeah.
thinking about that warm, lovely quality that she has.
Hmm.
So you went on tour, you were her tour manager and front of house?
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, I Room 5 closed, and then I was kind of figuring out, like, the next steps. Obviously, I shifted over to Hotel Cafe, and that was part of the plan all along. But the trick was, when I was running Room 5, I mean, I was working my ass off to fill that calendar all the time, and that's a lot of work. I have so much respect for bookers, and it's a crazy job that never you can't ever get away from it. It's constantly just bombarding you, and you always have slots to fill, and it's just such a gambling game. So anyways, I was doing that, and in order to really make the money, you had to really let it consume you, and I just wasn't interested in that, because the other side of me, of course, is that I was an artist all along, and all this stuff has really been to support me continuing to be an artist.
Right.
And sometimes it took precedence to where I was, a little compromised, and not giving enough attention to my own music, and because I was just so wrapped up and consumed by all this other stuff. But I got after Room 5 closed, I just kind of I was at a crossroads where I'm like, do I want to take on another calendar? And the truth was is that at the time, Marco wanted me to book the whole calendar for the second stage. That was originally what he was hoping that would work out. And I just, I just was really, I had to really sit with it because I just wasn't interested in taking on another calendar in the same way. I was, and so, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I did. It's just, it could have been cool on one hand. It was so important for me to keep uh, myself from being consumed. And so I had to think of other ways to go about it. And it kind of put me in a scary situation for a minute where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this without going back into like construction or something. And at the time that going on tour just seemed pretty daunting. Didn't have the confidence that I was going to be able to hang on different consoles every night and different size venues. And I mean, and I didn't know if it was going to pay me, what I needed to get paid. But then Haley, there was there's a band called the Record Company, which you probably heard of, and I was a big fan of theirs, and we were working together for local shows, and they were hiring me to do their sound for local shows at like the Satellite and Hotel Cafe and different things, and they said Chris, the singer, was like, "Man, I love the way you mix us, and if when we finally get to the place where we can take on a front of house guy, I'd love to bring you out on the road." And I was like, "Man, that'd be great." But I just kind of, filed that in the back of my mind. I'd love to be in a position to do that. And so Haley just came out of the blue saying, "Hey, I'm going on my first headliner tour, and I want you to be my front of house guy. Can you also tour manage?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't really tour managed before, but I think I can do it. I mean, I know what this is all about." And
Right.
so it was really a leap of faith, and luckily Haley and I already knew each other pretty well, and she's the best, and she felt great about me being with her on her first headlining tour. It was comforting to have
Yeah.
somebody that already knew her and knew how to make her sound great, and somebody that she trusted. And so I just, it was a great opportunity for me to dive in, and we had a great. It was just a month-long tour, all full cross-country tour, sprinter van, and what happened was we did that, and it was a big challenge, but they were such a great group of musicians, and Haley was great, and the management worked with me well, and I had a positive experience, and I learned a lot. It was a lot of work, but I learned a lot. And then coincidentally, as I was on tour with Haley, I got a call from the record company, and they literally, they wanted me to do their fall tour, and then they asked me if I could drive a sprinter van because that was one of the things they needed me to be able to do. And I'm like, I'm driving a sprinter van right now. And so they were psyched about that. And then they had some shows that were coming up right off of this Haley tour, to where I finished the Haley tour, hung out in New York for a week or two, and then picked up with the record company in Boston, and we went on a whole nother national tour right off of that. And then from that I ended up doing their whole fall tour, which the summer shows we did, and those little one-off, or they weren't one-offs, they were just little short tours. And that was kind of just to get into the groove of everything, so that when we did the 2-month solid tour in the fall, that I'd already, wouldn't be new stuff. And that worked out great. We loved working together, and we still do from time to time. And I love those guys. We have a lot of fun, and are all good buddies. So, and I even went to Europe with them last November, actually. And
Fun.
so, and so that was my intro. It was kind of a crash course in touring, but because I've been an artist, I've toured, I've been in production, and I've dabbled in so many different aspects of the music industry and the whole music lifestyle, to know the gist of a lot of what it was all about. But I definitely had to really learn fast, like what it really was all, and like all the resources and contacts and the know-how of how to do things, and not to mention learning how to be on any different console at any given night. Because at that level, it's important to be able to be, you're an asset if you can be a front of house guy and a tour manager, because a lot of people don't have the funding to, and the budget to have both. And so I learned early on. I had some other friends that were doing the same thing that kind of showed me the ropes too as well, and at least somebody that I could call and say, what do I do, or I don't know what this means, you know. And so I that was great, and there was a couple people in particular that really helped me out a lot, and I picked it up quick. I mean, you know, it was rough around the edges at times, and there was times I was stressed all get out,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
but you know, it was good. And then it all that really just kind of prepped me for the opportunity to take on the Lukas gig when that came around. And
Right. Oh
yeah,
my
that's
gosh.
been
I love your story so far. I mean, I really love the fact that you're persistent, that you're not afraid to say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Because I think that's
I my whole life has been faking it till you make it,
right.
and I mean, you know, I it's worn on me a bit, you know. It's very stressful at times, and you know, but I mean, at the same time, I'm kind of a glutton for that stuff anyways
Right. I
too.
mean, and is it really faking it? I mean, that you're a fast learner. You already are so talented, and I say that too often. And then people, good friends, go, "You're not faking it. You had to learn that quickly, and you're a person that we can throw to the fire." Yeah, it is true though. Once you're that person, they
Oh,
come
you get the
for you.
call all the time. Yeah, yeah.
They
I mean,
come for you to
well,
do all the work.
yeah, and you also think at some point you're like, okay, I am not educated on any of this stuff either. Like, aren't all these people that are
Yeah.
doing this, don't they go to school for this and everything?
No.
And here I am walking into like AT&T Park, and you know, we're getting ready to do this show with Lenny Kravitz and
Yeah.
Alicia Keys, and I've never mixed a stadium before in my life, and I'm just like, shit, like how am I? Is it okay to say I don't know what I'm doing? Like, you know, and then you go, and like I remember that particular show. I remember getting ready for the sound check, and then I hear the first notes of some instrument come off stage, and I hear that big slap back, and I'm like, oh God, this is gonna be a nightmare, you know. And I'm just like, is that supposed to be like that?
So tell me, so you did it, the Haley, and then you went. How did you get hooked up with Lukas Nelson and the Promise of the Real? How did
So
that come about, even?
that came about because I my bass player that has played on a bunch of stuff with me. I have a side band that I've done a lot of stuff with, and we can get into some of that too.
Sure,
That we called the Records,
the record.
and we my bass player is Mark Corbin,
Oh, yeah.
and he actually, funny enough, that night I told you about the first night I ever stepped foot in the Hotel Cafe.
Oh, yeah.
That night I met Mark Corbin,
Oh,
which is
cool.
just, you know, and a few different people. In fact, the drummer that played with me with Mark when I first started playing with Mark, Chris Lovejoy, I think I met him that same night.
Yeah.
So I met those guys that first night at Hotel Cafe. So years later, we had played a bunch of shows together, and and uh, and he was a touring tech, and then monitor engineer for Berlin, and then he eventually got the gig as front of house for Gary Clark Jr.
Aha.
So what happened was when I was in between gigs, um, you know, I was kind of trying to figure out what my next move was, and just so happened that Gary Clark Jr.'s manager had just signed Lukas at the time, and they were looking for a front of house tour manager, and Mark put my name in the hat, and he called me up. He said, "You're going to get a call from Scooter Weintraub. You should, you know, you should take this gig if it gets offered to you. It's a great gig." And I didn't know much about Lukas. I had heard about him a lot, but I'd never really checked him out. And I got the call shortly after from Scooter, and he invited me down to the Village to meet the band and to talk to them a little bit. And I walked in, and I, you know, had my usual like cowboy hat and, you know, the whole get up, and I walked in the door at the Village to John Alasia's studio, and Scooter's like, "You're hired." He just saw me, and he's like, "You've totally fit the part." And so we ended up sitting and chatting for a while, and I met Lukas, and we just were like, "Yeah, let's get into this." And I didn't know what kind of prep there was going to be or anything there. I didn't know if there was going to be rehearsals with Haley. There were rehearsals, you know, with the record company, there wasn't rehearsals, but I had worked with them before. So here I am with Lukas, and they're like, "All right, we're doing this show in San Francisco, the Great American Ballroom,"
Oh yeah,
which I had done with Haley, and I
that's
love
where
that
my
room.
brother's office is, right underneath there.
Oh, no kidding?
One floor under there, his firm is
Oh,
in
wow.
that building. So
Oh,
I've
cool.
spent
I love
time
that
there,
place.
just sitting in the middle, laying on the floor when no one's there. That's what I do when I go to San
Wow.
Francisco.
Yeah,
It's a great
that's
space.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that
How
room.
is it mixing that?
It's a little bit of a weird
Yeah.
place, but I've always had good shows there though. I mean,
Oh, good. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
it's a weird room, but I've always had great shows there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I literally had no prep at all
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
Lukas. I literally just got thrown to the wolves. And luckily the tech, Lucas's guitar tech, Brian Hager, he's been with Lukas for over 10 years. Story with that, because Lukas grew up in Maui, Brian lives in Maui, and I happened to be in Maui visiting some friends and got the gig. And Brian invited me to come over and chat with him to give, and he just briefed me on everything about Lukas. And it was just, yeah. And but then
That's
when I
awesome.
went back and I went to San Francisco, I literally just, I mean, I had to hire or we had a bus. It was some random bus situation that the Stars Born production had set up for us, and I'd never been on a bus before that, and so I didn't know what I was doing in that regard. And I literally had to fake it till I made it. And I
Yeah.
pulled it off. We had a great show, but I mean, I wasn't even scratching the surface of all the stuff I needed to learn for that gig at that point. But
Right.
it wasn't soon after that I, we got onto a full on tour. I think my third gig with Lukas was Bonnaroo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I mean we did our first show was the San Francisco, but then I think our second show was with Sheryl Crow and San Diego, and then our so no, our fourth show was at Bonnaroo, and our third show was at the Greek Theater with Cheryl, and
Oh, well, she's lovely on every
oh,
level.
she's awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
I,
had a great
lots
time
of
touring with her.
fun. Did you see on the notes I said smoking dope and rock and roll? I love Sean. I caught some footage from a coffee house where Sean goes, me and my brother wrote this song. And then he sings this hilarious song. I loved it. I thought it was so clever. Did you guys
Yeah.
grow up doing that together? Or was that the first song?
That's the
Only
first song we've ever written together. So the funny thing was my brother and I mean, we came up as musicians together. I mean, for a while, I mean, I was the older brother. And so for a while he was just, fascinated with everything I was picking up. And up until I left for college, everything he knew how to play on guitar was stuff that I had taught him how to play. And I was worried he was going to quit playing guitar after I left for college. And then I literally came back a semester later and he had formed a Metallica cover band and playing every Metallica song to a T, and it's like, okay, I guess he's in. And now I mean he's just an incredible guitar player and he plays with Andy Frasco in the UN. Pretty well known around like,
Yeah.
a lot of the jam band touring scene
Okay.
stuff and everything. And I
All
mean
right.
Andy's been doing this podcast thing for a while. It's been picking up a lot of
Okay.
viewership and everything. But they tour hard and
We do.
people
Yeah.
love them and they just put on this crazy show every night and the
That's
whole
awesome.
crowd goes nuts and they love them.
That's
But
so cool.
what happened with Smoking Dope and Rock and Roll was that my brother and I were hanging out years and years ago and we were stoned and we came up with that chorus and
Be more productive, Meredith. When we're
yeah, I mean, we came up with that chorus and we couldn't get it out of our heads. And everybody that we were hanging out with, that we were singing it around, they couldn't get it out of their heads. And they were like messaging us saying, oh my God, Smoking Dope and Rock and Roll, you have to write this song. And so we sat on it for a couple years. And then finally one day after, people, just all these different people had picked up on it and we get just these random messages, we have to sit down and write this song. And we'd always talked about writing music together, but we never really sat down and wrote a song together. And so of course, what perfect song. And so he came to LA one time and we just didn't, we agreed not to leave the apartment until we had finished writing that song. And so we wrote it and we got it all together. And I had written a few precursor verses and choruses to get it going, and then we just finished it together. And then a couple years after that, before we really even recorded it, I don't know who recorded it first, but I know before we released it ever, Andy Frasco covered it and did it on their record. And so
Oh, cool.
because Andy's just been growing and growing, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, he has crazy fans all over the world. And I mean, they got to the point where they're singing "Smoking Dope and Rock and Roll" in Europe to these big crowds of like a couple thousand people, and everybody's singing "Smoking Dope and Rock and Roll."
yeah. That is
And
so
it's like
cool.
there was even a Dutch, I think it was a Dutch band that was on like one of the local late night talk show kind of things where they covered it, you know,
Yeah,
and in
that's
in
rad.
their accents and everything. It was hilarious. So
See?
yeah, that song's had a life of its own for sure. And then we
It,
recorded our own version, and you know, it's still it kicks around, you
so
know,
that's interesting to
eventually.
me. So you've been there the whole time, and now your music. So how did you and do you? What's the plan? What's the vision? Because you're a man of vision. I believe I've seen anyway. And I think that you need to tell people how in the world did you keep up with your own songwriting, your own playing, and just creative energy. Like you said, it's hard sometimes. You're passed out after 19-hour days or whatever.
Yeah, I
Your
mean, I'll be
production.
honest. I found it really hard to write on the road, um, especially during the years where I was just completely slammed with tour management and you know, production management. I mean, there's just so many moving parts, and you really can't take your eyes off of everything for very long. There's always something that flares up, and you know, got to go deal with it. And so it was hard to, and I've always found it hard for me to shift the different sides of my brain. You know, I needed to find a better palate cleanse to do that. And so it was real hard. So the truth is that for the first couple years of touring, I, my songwriting took a little bit of a hit. I wasn't producing as much music, and I was just really not I wasn't exercising that part of me much at all. And then I, as I stayed in the game of touring more and more, I shed certain jobs like tour management, and then I just became, now I'm just production manager in front of house. And ever since then, I mean, my job becomes more important, but less busy and less like all consuming. So I'm finding now in the mostly just literally in the past year, and by past year I mean last year because this year doesn't count. But but and last year everything started to finally like free up a little bit where I actually felt like I had some time on my own, and I started thinking about songwriting again, and then of course with the pandemic I've just taken this whole opportunity to catch up on a lot of things and get back into writing, and I've been writing a lot.
Yeah,
But
well,
I like to think, and I have faith in the idea that as difficult and challenging as this whole thing has been, you know, I hope that a lot of people are going to learn a lot of things and come out of this better,
mhm,
and hopefully as a country we come out of this better.
yeah,
You know, but for me, I mean, I I'm feeling in this, the timing of this happened in a way where I'm finally feeling all the benefits of the hard work I've been putting in, because the all the work I put in had my back when I needed it for this, you know, and so I've been able to navigate it in a decent position where I haven't been, you know, completely screwed like some people I know have been, and so I've been able to take advantage of it, and I'm fortunate and grateful for that. But if I hadn't been hustling for the last however many years, I wouldn't be in this position at all, and I'd be
yeah,
really struggling. So, you
yeah,
know, I just I take it as a you know, milestone, or
yeah,
just a point of note where it's like, okay, you're getting to, it's kind of like uh, awkward and weird in this whole situation, but you're noting that you're up leveling here, and
mhm,
you know, despite all this, like there's an
oh
upward,
yeah.
and I'm finally getting to a place that I've been trying to get to for a long time. And so for now, I'm just putting everything I can into my own music. So just to get me better and to get a bunch of material that I can work with and stuff that I can be inspired by, and the idea being that once I do have the opportunity to go back out on the road, I'm hoping to have a bunch of music to push, because if you have it all in line in the right way, I mean, granted, you need to tour
Yeah,
and behind records and stuff like that, but more than anything, if I can at least be promoting,
yeah,
music online that I'm releasing and keeping a presence that way. And then, if it works out, maybe I can find holes in the tour schedule where I could pick up a
yeah,
show, and I don't, and then, like I was saying to you when we talked the other day, I mean, it's this parallel road that I realize it's ambitious to even think that both, like, am I going to have to choose between one or the other? And I very well may have to. I'm just hoping that when they finally do all come together, that it can work together and kind of, you know, be a merge of things rather than in just this crash, collision of it all. But, I look at it like, if that's what happens, then that's a good problem, really. If I have that choice and have to choose, we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm humble, I guess, in a way, but and I believe in my what I do on the road, and I think that I have a purpose there. But at the end of the day, if I had opportunities that came to fruition for playing my own music and doing more of my own music, that's where my heart's at the end of the day, always.
I think that's great, and good thing, because you are a stellar songwriter,
Thank
and
you.
the production is also stellar. And
Thanks.
what I would say is, when I first started listening to you, I was very obviously impressed, but what I really liked is your song structure, and that you took me in places that were unexpected, and it all worked. And I was like, oh, this is what I wanted. My soul is hungry for your music. And I think
Oh,
it
that's great.
is. And I think that there's others out there like me, where we're real music, a story. Oh, that is wonderful structure. And it's surprising. And your voice is awesome.
I love your voice.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Meredith,
thank you.
my producer's here, Meredith. Maybe she'll get on camera and pop her
Thank you,
little head.
Meredith.
Yeah, no, I love your voice.
But I want to, yeah, we're really eager actually to support you through musicianship, and also just to support you in the music community in any way, because you have given so much to our community. I'm actually humbled. I thought I was working hard all those years, and you're like doing construction. And I mean, it's crazy. We all are doing something, right? And I worked my butt
Yeah.
off and burned myself out, and I'm an artist of a different kind. But I have to say, I love that you're nurturing that artist within, because I want to hear more, and I know we're all eager to hear more. So I hope to hear some music from you. But I want to talk about a little bit before we get to that, about how you kind of, let's get into, just for a second, for the songwriters. Do you have anything that you want to say about how you learned to write a song? Like, how did you learn song structure like that? Because that is either just a natural gift, which I think some people just have that,
Hmm.
or a lot of people might have helped you along with that natural gift. I know you talked about that Bill Withers was a mentor of yours, and I'm sure you had many along the way, like we all have. Do you want to talk about that, and if that affected
Sure.
your songwriting, and how?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm coming from the heart, a heart that's tired of breaking. Somehow at the end of the day you feel the same. You wanna try to explain, well, what are you gonna do when it turns out the joke's on you? Will you finally change your